It now gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce to you Samantha Castro. She's a long-term campaigner and activist on social justice and environmental rights. She's the former spokesperson and founding National Council member of the WikiLeaks Party. And she's the co-founder of WACA, which I referred to before, which is Whistleblowers, Activists and Citizens Alliance. And she currently co-hosts a weekly radio program in Melbourne called Dirt Radio. Yeah, so over to you, Samantha.
Hello everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep. I want to acknowledge also the First Nations elders, past and present, and that we're standing on stolen land that was never ceded, sovereignty that was never ceded and treaty never signed, and we really should do something about that and support the First Nations in their efforts around sovereignty. I want to thank Politics in the Pub, Win, Kathy Vogan and William, wherever you are, if you're here. Hi. I've only seen you online, so we're in this cyber world. I'm seeing faces here. I'm sure I know online that I've never met in person.
Oh,
but yeah. So look, I want to talk about the intersectionality of the two issues that have been spoken about in relation to data retention, metadata, surveillance, and the activism components and militarism that Jake brought up. And I want to tie it into the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Do people know what it is?
Yeah. Everyone got a copy?
Yeah.
Release the text.
WikiLeaks.
No, it would be good to give it straight over here. Okay, so you guys know it's a 12 country deal, Pacific Rim deal. It's a corporate coup d'etat. You know, it's more than a free trade agreement. There are over 20 chapters. I think there's around 29 at last count from inside sources. It's a secretly negotiated treaty. It has 600 corporate insiders that are drafting the text, the likes of which include Halliburton, Monsanto, Pfizer, Bayer, you know, any corporate bastard you can think of is up there, and they're all involved. Murdoch is involved too, via links to other Disney and lots of other companies, and they all sort of rotate in and out of their own boards. If anyone is interested in those connections, you should go to a site called Little Sis, and you can actually pull up the interconnections between board members in various multinational corporations. And when you do that around the TPP, it's quite extraordinary the way they revolve in and out of each other's. There's always one that connects across. Little Sis, Little Sis, as opposed to Big Brother. Yeah, SIS, Little Sis. And it's called They Rule, is the actual application within the website that enables you to choose companies and areas of interest, e.g. oil corporations and military arms manufacturers. You know, you can go through the whole thing. Anyway, it's quite interesting. So since you already know quite a lot about the TPP, or at least you know what it is and who it involves, I want to get to a few of the things that are quite remarkable about this and why it's such a danger to us and the 800 million people that it's going to affect in the partnering nations. Again, it's driven by the US. Again, it's in secret. Corporations are writing the draft text in consultation with mainly US-led negotiators. So we basically have governments and corporations colluding to draft a treaty by corporations for corporations that will then impact, just as metadata and surveillance does, everything in our world. Like, this thing is extraordinary, and what we do know from the leaked chapters is there's some really serious things in there that we should be deeply concerned about. I think number one, we should be really concerned that this has been going on for 5 years, negotiated in secret. Stakeholders have been variously locked out through each negotiation round. It started off, you know, in 2012 we protested the talks here in Melbourne, and at that point NGO stakeholders could still get in and give an 8-minute presentation to the negotiators. Yeah, right. It's 8 minutes. Yeah. And after that, because we protested for 9 days and then went back to the States, same thing happened. They started tightening it and shutting it down and excluding people. So it really is in the dark, except for the leak components. WikiLeaks did the most recent leaks on it around the intellectual property and the environmental chapter. Public Citizens Watch, which is out of the US, Laurie Wallach is the head of that. Google her on YouTube and check her talking about the TPP. She's one of the most knowledgeable people on this trade deal in the world at the moment. They leaked an earlier version as well of the IP and the ISDS chapter. And that's the doozy. So you've got one, it's negotiated in secret. The people are not allowed to know it. At the moment, some of you may be aware that in the US they are mounting a campaign to stop the fast tracking of stamping this agreement. So the lucky thing for America is at the moment it still goes through Congress. Here in Australia, we're already effectively fast-tracked as far as I'm concerned, and Scott might want to disagree with that, I'm not sure. So, you know, the process here is these guys negotiate away our rights, our environmental rights, our intellectual property rights, our internet rights, our right to good healthcare, you know, all these things are negotiated away in secret. It then goes to a joint standing committee, which is stacked with Liberal Party people. They have the numbers in it. That committee can only make recommendations. It can't actually enforce the cabinet's then signing off on this. At that point, once that's done, the components that require legislative change will go into the Parliament. So, for example, if they have to actually change the copyright law, if they actually have to rejig the legislation to bring it into alignment, which is similar to what happened under NAFTA and World Trade, and there's a long history of global trade deals using their power to realign domestic legislation in foreign countries to US desires. So that's what will happen here. So, you know, we need to think about what that actually means. Not only are the stakeholders locked out, but people like Scott are effectively locked out as well. So the question is, who represents the people in this process? Why are the people not allowed to see it? Why are we so disempowered and so trusting of elected representatives that have lied to us over and over again since 9/11 about everything from war to our civil liberties? Why are we trusting them with this process? And why are people not jumping up and down on the streets? Part of the issue is it's very complicated, and part of the issue is they've attached the word free trade to it, which makes people kind of go, ugh, and at the same time, oh, free, good. But I know, it's, you know, it's clever, hey, it's really clever. But the point is that it doesn't work so well for the people of the countries. So, the problem is, you know, the ISDS component is the really huge problem, the Foreign Investment Dispute Resolution process, combined with the IP chapter. And the reason for this is it's corporate grab over everything from patenting seeds to generic medicines to mining companies, suing governments when we finally all decide to nationally ban fracking, and all of those companies that have licenses already say, well, we predicted we'd earn $2 billion out of that, so you can either change the law and compensate us or leave the law the way we like it. So these are all things that are designed to blackmail, intimidate not only the citizenry but also the governments. And it's not just federal government. Obviously, mining licenses are state, but these corporations will use the Trans-Pacific Partnership to make sure that that is also implemented at a really local level. So, for example, you know, farmers that are fighting to keep our food bowls clean are going to have a hell of a time, because on one hand they're going to be forced to buy Monsanto products that are going to destroy their land, and on the other hand, every time they try and lock out the miners, they're going to end up in a court system that is in secret, that has a corporate tribunal effectively, that has no right of appeal. The decision is final, and the implication is then put on the Australian taxpayer to cover whatever the compensation is. So this is a really dirty deal, and what I want to link it into, and this is how, you know, besides the IP things, which we can talk about in the Q&A session about the detail of how it links into surveillance and metadata, what I want to say on the big picture, and this is where we really need to start thinking, We have all these things going on. We have a state of continuous warfare. We have human rights being eroded at every level of policy in the federal government, from refugees to civil liberties to protest rights. We have mass surveillance coming in. There is a war going on, and the war is between corporations and the community. And unfortunately, at this point, what has happened is that the government has merged itself on the side of corporations. So what's happened is we have now been inculcated, or perhaps, I liked your word before, what were you using? Inoculation. You know, powers that be also inoculate us slowly into processes like the boiling frog example. So our very concept of what it means to live in a democracy and what rights and values we have as sovereign entities have been eroded, that we now twin this concept of psychotic neoliberal capitalism that is leading us to cataclysmic climate change. We now link that with the concepts and values of democracy and our own rights. So we now talk about our privacy rather than talking about our sovereign liberty as individuals. We now talk about success based on profit and material consumption rather than a happy life where we work as community together. So what we really need to open up and think about is, yes, we need to resist all of these things as they come up. But if we don't find a pathway forward that rebalances this triangulation between community, corporations and governments, democracy has no meaning. It has been inverted, and it's authoritarian rule for the sake of profit. So we have some very serious unpacking to do about what we as activists and the left have achieved and what we haven't achieved. And we also have some very serious unpacking to do about what we want to create, both in our financial systems, our economic systems, our cultural systems. Because right now, we have completely disempowered ourselves. And while it would be wonderful to see 100 Scott Ludlams in the Parliament, I don't know if we're ready for all that hair, though. Could you imagine all that hair? I don't know. It might be too much. We can't wait for 100 Scots. We need every Scot that we can get. We need every Scot that we can get. But actually, we need community leadership, and we know the pathway. We know how to get around these things. Jacob just talked about encryption. There's all sorts of things we can discuss in the Q&A. My point is that these are all symptoms of a completely decayed and corrupted system. It's completely broken. We've outgrown it. We either evolve or we die. So, you know, crossroads. And these things are all encapsulating us into a restricted zone where we won't even have the right to dissent once we're there. So this is the time that we really need to unpick this stuff really seriously and wind up. So let's talk about that in the Q&A, because I'm really interested in how we do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.